Welcome, my rising, redeemed, relentless warriors. I'm Icarus, and this is the After the Fall show, the place where lives are shared, falls are felt, and rebirth is forged in fire. And today, we're going to be talking about image, identity, and so much more. And I'm really blessed here today to be joined by Zorosa. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, guys. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining. I know that obviously I'm in the UK and we've kind of talked on social media a little bit back and forward over a couple of years since I started my journey. And you were one of the first people who were kind enough, actually, when I had 0 followers, to actually bother to interact with me. So starting
Yes.
out of the gate, thank you so much for that. And obviously I appreciate that I'm in the UK and you're in the US. So thank you for making the time today to try and squeeze in my kind of afternoon, evening show into your morning. Would you just jump straight into this? Because I think this is going to be something that's going to have so much power for people in many different ways. So I'm excited to hear more about your journey. So if you don't mind, can I ask my first question?
Yes.
Great. So if we go back to the beginning, this is way before I knew you, what did your life look like before things began to change? Who were you if you were to go back to the start of your story?
Oh my, I was very much a vain person, very much peacocking on the internet on TikTok until COVID hit. And shortly after COVID and we started getting back to normal in the world, that my health started to fail me. I've been a type 1 diabetic since I was 10 years old. And so this happened like mid-20s, so about 15 years or so. And my body started to kind of swell a little bit. And I thought like, oh, maybe I'm just eating too much salt. I kind of dismissed it for a little bit until I essentially couldn't anymore. And I couldn't even lay down without breathing. And so kind of like the timeline is that COVID happened. I lost my very active job working at a dojo and even working at a brewery company. Doing that as a diabetic is not the best decision, especially when they give you free beer and stuff. And so doing that wasn't really great for my health, especially my mental health. I was doing it for, I was overindulging and stuff like that. Not necessarily leaning into alcoholism, but I was doing a lot more than I should have for the sake of attention and kind of fitting in with people and stuff. It wasn't great. And especially for my diabetes, it was even worse. So very quickly, I was getting into really stupid situations involving it. And I ignored my health for too long. I went on my last cruise and I couldn't even lay down. And so right after, my husband dragged me to the ER, and then I learned that I was experiencing kidney failure. And then a couple months later, I was officially on dialysis, and my whole world just was crumbling around me, as well as like my face swelling up. And so I wasn't even really able to garner the same attention as I was because I looked like a puffed up balloon. So it wasn't great.
I mean, there's so much to pick into there, I guess. It sounds like obviously your lifestyle is one piece, and then it sounds like your identity. Before the changes happened, were you living the identity you thought you should live, or were you living the identity you thought society thought you should live?
I think a little bit of both. I think society really shaped the way that I feel that I should interact with the world. Being a girl and stuff, you want to, especially in today's age, is like you really have to lean into what they want if you want to get what you want. And I was led to like, kind of almost abuse my looks in order to kind of use them as a weapon in order to navigate the world to get what I wanted out of the world. It left me feeling very empty inside, to be honest, because it's like, if I got a video that didn't get as much likes or whatever, I would crumble. And, just kind of like the toxicity of, social media attention when you don't have anything based in reality that I think a lot of us have struggled with.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I think that, for example, on looks, like you say, you can see it today. It's still when you're going to get one person with all these looks. I'm not going to say they have no talent because that's awful, isn't it? But they have a look that they're selling for the attention of likes. And even with someone like that, the algorithm can change on a weekend, can't it? And suddenly you blame yourself when actually no, they just decided they're going to prioritize the Super Bowl this month, I guess, or something. I guess So
Yeah.
it's outside of your control, isn't it? But if you built a life around that, I can imagine that can be hard. I'm not built a life around it, but built a persona, I suppose, and how you're getting the dopamine kicks you need in life.
Yes. And so it's just like you're kind of a slave to the algorithm or people's whims. And so it's just it's hard to please 1,000 people, much less like, if you have more than that in followers, it's like, and that's even if you get onto their pages kind of thing. So it was really not great for my mental health.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick between your physical changes that you began to sort of experience, these feelings you were feeling before the
Yeah.
ER, the mental health side of it, which of these things do you think was the red flag that you first noticed yourself, and which was the red flag that the society or your friends, family noticed first?
Um, well, at that time, my family noticed the swelling. My husband was just like, "Sam, are you good or whatever?" And I was very much like, "Yeah, it's fine. I just been on my feet all day. I worked a double, blah 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 blah. I'll be fine. I'll be fine." And because I am somebody who's very much a denier when it comes to my health, because I couldn't even tell you why. It's just always been a thing with me, I guess.
I think it's the thing with
Um,
a lot of people. I mean, especially when some of us are fine with a knock, but yet something else
mhm.
we'll be panicking about and we'll try and ignore. I've been there myself, so definitely
Yeah, like
universal.
sometimes you kind of my husband had to be the SWAT team with the knocking for sure and just kind of bust through
Yeah,
that door. He's like, "Nope, we're going right now.
yeah.
Like, grab your bags, let's go." And so,
Well,
yeah, it was definitely my family noticing first because I will deny and deny and deny until I can.
and from that point then, so you've been to the kind of like you've been your husband as the SWAT team's burst through the door. You've begun to get investigations done. What was the first thing that really shifted you then to begin to want to change that pattern? Was it going for the session at the hospital and the feedback, or was it something else growing inside you?
Probably about the same time, like, this eye started to kinda go out a little bit, and when I finally reached the point where I was on dialysis a couple months later from the initial ER visit, that's when I knew that, like, I really done it. I was just like, "This I have to somehow survive this. I can't just lie down." And, something that I think a lot of people don't realize about dialysis is that it's really hard on you mentally and emotionally because it's like your life stops, but the rest of the world is going on without you.
Mm,
And you almost feel like you're kind of walking around like a dead person. It's hard to really explain. And so a lot of people will actually stop doing dialysis and people are just like, well, how could you do that and stuff like that. Like it's just like, I mean, I get it. Like I don't blame people that do that. I still push them like, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting.
yeah.
And, I do have a fighting spirit within me, which I found, by being on dialysis, when he had nothing but to fight.
There's a
So
subtle irony for someone who's never been through dialysis. There's an irony, isn't there, hearing those words? Because, well, I guess a few bits. One is thank you for sharing it because it's incredibly brave to share any of these things, and I think it's interesting and useful for the world to hear honesty. But then on the outside, and this is where if you're not logically sort of linked to this, you go, why would anybody stop doing that? But you can imagine that if you feel like your life is stopping to keep you alive, then you'd rather go and live. If that makes sense to the
yeah,
fact where you may not. There's an irony to that, isn't there? Like it's a
yeah,
circle.
yeah, and it's really hard, and especially when, you're an older person, because this is something that usually happens to, like, people that are in their 50s, 60s, and above. So when, somebody being as young as in her late 20s, like, that
Yeah.
was crushing. So, for me, I really had to, fight to live kind of thing. But more importantly is, like, fight my mental state to, not give up too. And, like, the process for at least I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in the United States, in the area that I live, I'm blessed to be close enough to a transplant facility, here in Tampa, Florida, and it takes approximately about a year to get on the list.
Yeah.
And because I was also diabetic, I was very blessed in the fact that I could get both kidney and pancreas and then eliminate the reason that I went into kidney failure to begin with.
Yeah.
Um and so, yeah, so the timeline essentially, because it was more than just the dialysis too, it was actually both my eyes went bad. Like about a month into my dialysis, I was walking around Universal Studios and we're on our way back to the car. It's nighttime and it's raining and both eyes went out.
Wow.
And oh my gosh, it was so scary. And so, we made it to the car, and this eye pretty much looked like I was looking through shattered glass, which now seems almost poetic because that pretty much was like kind of like my life. It was like
Mm.
this perfect little crystal ball, and all of a sudden it's, shattered glass and stuff. And so, yeah, it was pretty rough. But then that was kind of like the second is like I almost had a fall and then a second fall almost. So it's like I landed on the ground and then I rolled over and fell off the cliff again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I always call that the it's different from my story and different from other people's, but I always call it the almost a moth effect where we burn ourselves. There's that thing we hit, And then we get back
Yes.
up and we're like, yeah, we're good. But we look at the light again and we start just living like nothing's wrong and you
Yeah.
just bang it again and down you go. And it's
Yes.
that change, isn't it, that makes you then go, okay, I'm not going to go to that anymore. Something's going to go
Yeah.
the
It's
other
just
way.
like, I can't even go there anymore. Like, I can't even get up.
Yeah. I mean, that leads nicely then. So, I mean, getting up. So I guess for me, what was the moment that something shifted where you went, I am going to get up. I'm not going to be beaten by this. And what changed? And not like the highlights reel, but like the real version
Mhm.
of Zorosa going through that. What was it?
It was a couple things. 1, my story deserved a better ending, and 2, I had way too many people that I still loved that I didn't want hurt because of losing me. And not in a I know that for me, that kinda sounds a little vain, but it's genuinely just like, I love people too much to hurt them
Yeah,
when I can easily fix it. Or not so granted, this wasn't easy, but in my brain, it was easy for me because if I kept my eyes on them and I kept my eyes on everything outside of myself,
yeah,
I had a reason to live.
yeah,
Um, and even outside of that, it's just like my story still deserves a better ending. So
yeah.
that would, yeah.
There's nothing selfish about wanting to keep yourself going on behalf of others. So I mean, my story is the
Very
same with
true.
my children. I promised them I wouldn't go anywhere, and even on the hard days now, I've just been for a walk today and it struggled. I'm like, I'm doing it for them.
Mhm.
This isn't going to be over. I'm doing it, and it sounds like you've taken that same journey as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
fabulous.
and it's been, yeah.
So if with what you know now, if you saw
Mhm.
someone moth effect again, banging into it, rolling off the cliff end, what would you
Mhm.
shout down to them about what people don't understand about changing or recovery or just being someone new? What would you be hollering down the corridor to them?
Definitely, it's okay to be the villain in your own story. You can give yourself the redemption arc that you deserve. Your identity isn't in that soul moment, in that soul habit or stuff like that. Like I'm recovering from self-sabotage myself. And so like and I can give you a whole novel about all the self-sabotage habits that I was doing and I really had to break those down during my dialysis times because you have nothing but your own thoughts. Even if you had a game on your phone, you're scrolling on TikTok, you're literally there for 4 hours. And I was
Uh,
doing it about 4 to 5 times a week. So like, you have nothing but time to reflect on yourself. And I really felt like, and I'll get a little faith-based here that, like, I had to really sh God was really breaking me down, and I had to really reflect on a lot of my past things and why I was self-sabotaging to begin with. And I realized that I was the villain in my own story and I needed to address that. And so like I had to look at all my poor behaviors, the way that I was hurting other people around me, and even just like a lot of the anger that I was dealing with, or the felt that I need to peacock in the room and stuff because I was drinking excessively because I wanted to keep up with everybody else. Meanwhile, I'm diabetic and killing myself trying to fit
uh,
in, and my life is not worth fitting in with people who also needed to work on themselves and unpack things and stuff. And I was tired of being stuck in this prison that I was keeping myself in order to be gawked at by people who didn't even care or invest in me. So it was silly. Stop being the villain is you got to get out of the villain cave and start reforming yourself and stuff. And for me, it was really God kind of dragging me out of my own pits and dropping all these chains. And I had to
mm,
break it link by link by link by link. And sometimes will still try to pick up this pile of broken links and stuff, and when I realize I'm doing it, I go back, and I'm
yeah.
just like, you know, over here I don't know if it's an international thing, but we have, like, Celebrate Recovery at my church, and that's been, like, a huge thing, and having people to, like, sucker punch you with the truth definitely helps too. Yeah, so, like, in those times, like, before my transplant, I was, breaking down the ground, like, God was, like, kinda tilling the land and stuff, so by the time that the seeds were planted and I started becoming a garden again, I
Mm,
know, and it was really, like, my gravesite that became a garden. That's actually if you're ever at my house, you'll see a lot of, skulls with flowers on it and stuff like that because my grave was turned into a garden. So
yeah. But for those who are listening or for anyone who are watching, I've got a button over here that has a cheer next to it, and I was supposed to press it
yes.
when Zorosta said her first comment because it was such a good quote. But I'm going to press it now for the sucker punch you with the truth line because that is a winner. We all need one of those. There we go. We always. The thing is, I think. Watch this stop. That is a long sample. I think there's something about a few things you said which ring true for me. I think that the nothing but time. So when I was recovering from drinking, not on dialysis, but my life had gone because drinking was my life. So on my sofa, because I was in pain, couldn't walk and stuff. I had those reflective
Mhm.
moments too. And you do have to have some hard conversations and not avoid them with yourself, because if you
Yes.
avoid them, then you're kind of accepting that that's just that. But you have things to learn, things to grow with reflection, don't you? And to take a life
Yes.
where you've been doing things, like you say, to follow the others and sort of stick with a crowd that didn't really care. There's difference,
Yes.
isn't there, between falling in the line in the queue you join or stepping out of it and being brave. So
Yes.
the world's glad you stepped out of it, because going on to my next question, and it's two-part for yourself. The first one is, obviously you have
Mhm.
faith, and I think that's really important. Your wings are different from mine in as much as I use mine in the Icarian sense. And fire, for
Mhm.
me is what burnt me, the sun, and that's how I kind of live my own sort of almost spiritual S now, through how I've kind of reinvented myself. But you have this
Yes.
other thing which comes with wings as well. So this is more important to me, to see how you answer this, right? To see what your gift to the world is, which would be, you've been in a dark place where your wings are tattered, right? You've had that reflection time.
Mhm.
You've got back up and you're in the light now. Your wings are rebuilt and you've got purpose, and you're doing so well doing so. And
Yes.
we'll talk about your the church afterwards, because I've got an observation I have to share with the world. But
Yes.
if you could pluck one feather from that and you were going to jot something down, all right, it could be a note, it could be an entire saga. There's no full stop at the end in this until you drop the pen. So if you're going to take
Mhm.
that out and hand it to someone next to you, and that could either be someone you know in your mind you're thinking of right now as you do it, or it could be someone
Mhm.
across the world you've never even met and you're going to let it go in the wind, right? What would you
Right.
write on that to give to somebody else?
So good. Definitely that the the journey starts with one step, right? A lot of people say that. But understanding that your value is actually worth that journey. I don't care how horrible of a human being you believe yourself to be. For me, I am a Christian. I am very much a believer. And so
Mm.
you had the Son of Man come down. We just celebrated Easter, and he literally stormed the gates of hell so that way you have an opportunity to be in a relationship with him. And even then, all the way in Genesis, we were made in God's image. And to have that much value put into you by the one who created you and designed you. And especially when you start getting into all of, history and, the Bible, and even just the way that you're designed as a human being, your eyeballs, especially, ironically, because I'm blind, even so, that even just the way that my body has healed and stuff, you really kind of see, the fingerprint of God. And so that, you are worth dying for by the creator. And so that imbues a lot of value to you and a lot of identity into you, but to understand that your journey is worth it because you are worth it. So you may have to scramble in the mud for a little bit, but eventually you will get to that dry ground. And one day you will look back and you'll realize I survived that, and that happened like about 20 years ago. I survived that, and now I get to help others recover from the same thing. I'm actually a sponsor now. I finally finished my 12 steps in the Celebrate Recovery program, and I already have 2 people, that are my sponsees, and it's been such a blessing to kinda be able to take things that I've recovered from and actually start to, heal from that and watch them heal from the same things and stuff like that, and so it's just essentially the journey. You are worth the journey. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, that goes perfectly
Yes.
to my question for you then, obviously, because you've just now touched on faith in more detail. Is that,
Mhm.
again, from the outside, growing up in the 80s, people would say to me about going to church. And I'd be like, oh,
Yes.
hang on a minute, Mrs. Smith up the road goes to church and she's very straight laced. But I
Yeah.
can only describe you as having this scale where and I know you have faith, and then I see you wearing
Mhm.
goth boots. So someone did
Yes.
say to me, my wife said, "Who's that person you're watching?" I'm like, "Oh, that's all right. She's like a goth Christian," and I had to explain this whole thing, but I love it. So can you go into that?
Yes.
I haven't really got a closer for today. Can you just explain more? And also, I know you mentioned before we started
Yes.
recording this, your YouTube work you're doing as well. To try to build something there. So please share it with the world, because
Yes.
I think it's great to see
Okay.
things being done differently.
Yes, and the cool thing is about it is that, because of places like TikTok and social media in general, you kinda see more of us now, which is awesome because I think a lot of people need to understand it's not based on there's not a uniform. A
Mm,
lot of people are something that my old church used to say is, there's not cookie cutter Christians.
Yeah.
And Celebrate Recovery is actually one of my favorite places because you see people, you see all these addicts into recovery people. You see all, like last night was chip night, dude. There was like so many people picked up chips, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. But all of these people are like ragtag. Some of us are still recovering physically from our poor decisions and stuff like that. But then you hear their testimonies, and they're like they love to see me coming because I'm like this like little sister, I guess, because I'm one of the younger ones there. Um, that I lost my train of thought. Sorry, but that I literally was wearing like my little hoodie that has cat ears and it's, plaid and black and stuff like that. I mean, I even wear this black cross on me all the time and stuff. And like my church loves it because they love diversity and God
Mm.
loves diversity too. Like not all flowers look the same. We have, you know, yellow roses, white roses, and so God was so diverse with nature that God has even made humans different. We have different eye colors, we have different hair, we have, different noses and stuff like that. He loves diversity and he wants
Mm.
that in his church. And
Yeah.
so my YouTube is called the Godly Goth channel. You can find me at Sammy the Spooky Saint on YouTube. And there, not only do I talk about like, godly conversations, but also just kind of my personal journey with my faith because one of my big things that was my self-sabotage was I was very performative in any environment that I was in. If I was active in church, I was performing there. I was putting on the smile and, pretty dresses, painful headbands, frilly socks and shiny shoes. And that wasn't me.
Mm.
I don't get me wrong. I do enjoy a good floral dress every once in a while, but most of the time I like drape me in black and I'll wear skulls and stuff. And when people, kind of I was mentioning earlier is that like my
Mm.
grave was turned into a garden. So when people ask me, well, what's with the skulls and the coffins and stuff? Like I have a coffin purse and people love it. And so if anyone would be like, well, why do you carry a coffin? It's like you're dead or whatever. And it's like, no, my grave is empty. That's why it's my purse.
Yeah.
Like, and so, and much in the same way is that like, God also created the crow and the bat and each has its function in the ecosystem. And even then, in the Bible, there's two mentions of crows. One was meant, or crows or ravens, but a black bird. That one was to feed Elijah, and who's like one of the superstars of the Bible, and
Yeah.
then one was that was sent out first before the dove that found the olive branch at the Noah's Ark
Mm.
story. So it's just like, us spooky folk also belong in the church, in the body of Christ and stuff. And so, and very much so, I'm a youth leader, and the kids that have a hard time relating to the other adults, they see me and we talk about metal music, we talk about, all sorts of stuff, and they don't feel like they have to hide themselves around me, and that allows them to be more open about their faith.
Yeah.
And that's if they gain nothing from my life, that they can understand that God designed them to be exactly the way they are. So, and very much in the same way as like even though you're in addiction or struggling with whatever bad things that you're dealing with, that your story itself is unique and God designed your story to be unique. And all you have to do is just kind of lean on that and stuff. And like obviously I always encourage people to follow Jesus because that those conversations that I was having while I was in the dialysis chair was really with Jesus and just really kind of, and I know it sounds kind of like Bible thumpery, but it's just like there's times where I was literally just crying because I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to survive this, but I know that I'm going to because, and it's still like one of my favorite scriptures ever. It's Jeremiah 29:11, and it's for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And that was literally what I was holding on to, like white knuckled with both hands. And lo and behold, yeah. And I'll finish off with this really incredible aspect about my transplant story. Um, so my mom passed away when I was about 10 years old from cancer, and she passed away on March 31st, which fell on an Easter.
Mm.
And it was very crushing. It ruined Easter for me for decades. And and then the day that I got my transplant, so they in transplant they call you up and you show up to the hospital. You're not always guaranteed to get your organs that day. and it's very crushing when that happens. It happened to me twice. But on the third offer,
Yeah.
yeah. So on the third offer, it happened on Good Friday. And usually the pancreas is the thing that usually that kept me from getting my transplant that night because it's a very finicky organ to transplant. It's a whole thing. The pancreas was the first thing to be cleared. So I was just like, okay, we're doing good so far because kidneys are the most durable organ, I learned. And so the next thing was the kidney. So at 7:30 that night, I went into the OR to get my new organ. So that was the third offer on a Good Friday. And then by Easter, I was out of the ICU, like out of the trauma unit ICU and into a normal room to recover. And so the funny thing about that was it was Easter, right?
Mm.
On March 31st, Easter.
Yeah.
And so and the organs clicked in right away, which is very unusual. So there was just a lot of ways that God is just like,
It's
all I
okay
needed
now.
you to do is just trust me. And
Yeah.
so it's my favorite story, out of all the little mini testimonies that I have in my story, that that one is my favorite story to tell because it is such a perfectly written story by God. And so yeah.
Thank you for sharing it. And everything does happen for a reason. I do believe, especially
Mhm.
after finding a lady up the road just this past week in a car crash when I just suddenly had to go to a shop. I don't know why I had to do it. And I drove up the road and
Yeah.
this young girl's car was flipped and I was the first person there. And
Oh,
I
wow.
posted about it, people have been saying to me, well, you're meant to be there. And again, if someone who doesn't have that kind of faith,
Exactly.
but it does make you go, things happen for a purpose and there's symbolism and signage and everything. So there has to be
Exactly.
someone's trying to tell us whether we're listening or not, if that makes sense. But listen, Zorosa, I'm
Exactly.
going to have to call it there if that's okay.
Yes.
I'm mindful of the time, and I'm mindful that at some point I have to get back to work. So have a
Yes.
great day. Listen, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you.
story, and I hope that anybody who's listening takes away not just the faith, not just that goths are cool, but also that your journey is one of identity. It's one of struggling and having to deal with oneself at a time when oneself is failing and rebuilding not just your identity, but physically in a world that will try and help,
Mhm.
but it's all on us, isn't it, to really take those pieces and make it work.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing your story. My name's
Thank
Icarus.
you.
Zorosa, do you want to share your TikTok as well, your handle for people so they can find you on all channels?
Yes, it's a Zorosa Klein. So this and then CLINE. And I'll be on there making all sorts of random content.
And if you haven't followed already, please go and check out her YouTube channel. Every advice is good advice.
Yes.
It's up to us to take the lesson and to learn it. So my name's Icarus. This is the After the Fall show. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. Icarus out.
Bye, guys.